The mud of the forbidden forest tastes like iron and rot when you are face down in it, trying to become invisible. Elias Thorne knew this taste well. He had been eating dirt, metaphorically and literally, since his first day at Hogwarts. But tonight, the dirt was the only thing keeping him alive. 3 yards away, a boot crunched on a dry twig. The sound was like a gunshot in the heavy, suffocating silence of the trees. Elias did not move. He did not breathe. He pressed his cheek harder into the wet mulch, his right hand gripping the rough, knotted length of wood that served as his wand. It didn't feel like a wand. It felt like a broken branch he had picked up off the ground, which was exactly what the purebloods in Slytherin had called it for 6 years. Firewood, kindling, the splinter. They laughed when sparks sputtered from its crooked tip during charms. They jeered when it refused to perform a clean transfiguration, turning teacups into half-formed jagged ceramics. But they weren't laughing now. Mostly because 5 of the 7 Death Eaters hunting them were already down, bound by roots or swallowed by the earth, and the elite dueling champions of Ravenclaw and Gryffindor were scattered, terrified, and useless in the dark. If you want to know how a boy with a wand bought from a junk bin in Knockturn Alley became the only thing standing between a Death Eater hit squad and a massacre of first years, stay with me until the end of this story. It was the height of the First Wizarding War. Fear was a physical weight in the castle corridors. But the attack didn't happen at the gates. It happened during a late-night astronomy detention in the forest. A small, vicious cell of Death Eaters had bypassed the wards, hunting for high-value hostages, children of ministry officials. The teachers were cut off. The prefects, with their polished movements and textbook stances, had tried to fight. But the forest doesn't fight fair. Elias remembered the first 10 minutes of the chaos. A Ravenclaw prefect, top of his dueling class, had stood tall, shouting a disarming charm. Ideally, a beam of red light would have flown straight and true. But the Forbidden Forest is thick with ancient, chaotic magic. The damp air diffused the spell. The heavy hanging moss absorbed the light. The Death Eater had simply laughed, stepped behind a tree, and fired a curse that shattered the prefect's knee. That was the lesson. Precision didn't work here. Speed didn't matter when the terrain fought you. Elias shifted his legs, the cold seeping into his bones. 2 enemies left. He could feel them through the soles of his boots. That was the secret. His wand, that ugly, twisted piece of unknown wood, hated delicate wrist movements. It hated Latin spoken with a crisp accent, but it loved the earth. It hummed when it touched soil. It vibrated when thunder rolled. It was a blunt instrument of nature. And right now, Elias was just the conduit. He needed to move. The 6th Death Eater was sweeping the area with a sensory charm, a high-pitched whining sound that cut through the rain. Elias waited. He didn't cast a shield charm. A shield charm was a glowing beacon in the dark, a target. Instead, he dug the tip of his crooked wand deep into the soft, yielding earth beneath him. He closed his eyes and didn't think about words. He thought about the roots of the devil's snare he had harvested in herbology. He pushed his magic down, not out. The wand grew hot in his hand, a dull, throbbing heat like a fever. 10 feet away, the ground rippled. It wasn't a spell you'd find in a textbook. It was crude magic, heavy and slow. The Death Eater stepped forward, his eyes scanning the tree line, wand raised high. He never looked down. With a wet, tearing sound, the earth beneath the man's boots simply collapsed. It wasn't a sinkhole, it was a bite. The soil churned, wrapping around his ankles like wet concrete. The man shouted, firing a curse wildly into the canopy, showering them both in green sparks. Elias didn't let up. He twisted his wand like he was turning a heavy key in a rusted lock. The mud solidified, hardening instantly into stone. The Death Eater was trapped up to his knees, immobile, a sitting duck. Elias rolled onto his back, gasping. The magic took a toll. It felt like running a sprint with a sack of bricks on his chest. Every time he forced his wand to commune with the forest, it drained him of warmth. He was shivering violently now. He knew he should get up and stun the man, but his legs felt like jelly. This was the reality of the Firewood wand. It had no finesse. It was a cannon that fired raw exhaustion. He remembered the day he bought it. He was 11, his pockets full of nuts and sickles he had saved for 2 years. Ollivander's was too expensive. He had gone to a pawn shop in the Dark District. The proprietor had laughed, tossing the stick onto the counter. "Found it in a bog," the man had said. "Violent temper. Useless for charm work. Take it or leave it." Elias took it because it was 5 galleons. He took it because it felt warm when he touched it, like holding a living animal. For 6 years he had tried to mold himself to the school's standards. He tried to be elegant. He tried to be precise. And he failed. He was the invisible boy, the disappointment. But out here, in the mud and the dark, elegance was a liability. If this forgotten legend of Hogwarts is already touching your heart and you'd like to help keep these stories alive, you can support the channel by clicking the thanks button below the video. Every little bit helps me continue bringing you more hidden tales of courage and magic. The trapped Death Eater was screaming now, calling for his partner. That was the mistake. Elias scrambled to his feet, using a tree trunk for support. He pointed the gnarly tip at a heavy, waterlogged branch hanging directly above the trapped man. A standard severing charm would take too much precision. Elias simply shoved a pulse of raw force at the tree. The branch snapped with the sound of a cracking whip. It fell, heavy and wet, striking the Death Eater across the shoulder and head. The screaming stopped. Silence returned to the forest, heavier than before. One left, the leader. Elias checked his internal inventory. He was dizzy. His left arm was throbbing where he'd grazed it against a curse hours ago. His wand felt incredibly heavy, the wood pulsing with a slow, rhythmic beat, like a dying heart. He had no potions, he had no backup. The teachers were still trying to breach the anti-apparition wards at the forest edge. It was just him. A voice cut through the dark, smooth and amplified. "Come out, boy. I saw your little trick with the mud. Very clever, very primitive. The leader was close. Elias pressed his back against the ancient oak. This wasn't a game of hide and seek anymore. The leader knew where he was. A beam of blue light sliced through the tree trunk inches from Elias's ear, sizzling the wood. He threw himself to the side, rolling into a cluster of ferns. Another curse blew the ferns apart, sending burning leaves raining down on him. This wizard was different. He was fast. He wasn't waiting for targets. He was demolishing the cover. Elias scrambled on hands and knees, mud splashing into his eyes. He couldn't use the ground trap again. The leader was moving too quickly, dancing over the roots. He couldn't drop a branch. The man had a shield charm shimmering around him, a perfect translucent sphere that repelled rain and debris. Elias needed to break that shield. But a disarming spell from his wand would wobble and fade before it hit. He needed something heavier. He needed a projectile that no shield charm was calibrated to stop. He spotted it. A massive, rotting stump of a fallen tree. Barely held together by fungus and moss, sitting on a ridge 10 yards above the Death Eater's path. It weighed 1/2 ton. Elias broke cover. It was a suicidal move. He sprinted across the clearing, drawing the fire. "There you are," the Death Eater laughed, flicking his wand almost lazily. "Avada!" The green light began to gather at the tip of the killer's wand. Elias didn't fire at the man. He threw himself flat onto the ground, aiming his wand at the ridge, at the rotting stump. He didn't cast a levitation charm. That was for feathers. He screamed, pouring every ounce of his fear, his anger, and his remaining magic into a banishing thrust. His wand didn't spark, it roared. A shockwave of distorted air, smelling of ozone and turned earth, erupted from the tip. The recoil was so strong, it dislocated Elias's shoulder with a sickening pop. The force hit the stump like a wrecking ball. The rotting wood exploded from its resting place, not floating, but launched with violent kinetic energy. The Death Eater looked up. He had time to widen his eyes. He shifted his aim, trying to intercept the mass. But you cannot curse 1,000 pounds of flying timber. The log smashed into the shield charm. The magical barrier held for a microsecond, shining brilliantly, and then shattered under the sheer physical mass. The wood crashed through, burying the wizard underneath an avalanche of rot and splintered oak. The impact shook the ground. Then silence. Elias lay in the mud, clutching his hanging arm. He couldn't hear anything except the ringing in his ears. He waited for the green light. He waited for the pain of a curse. But there was only the sound of rain falling on dead leaves. He didn't stand up. He couldn't. He just lay there, his face pressed against the cold earth. His firewood wand still gripped tight in his shaking hand. It was warm, cooling slowly, like a weapon that had finally been fired. Dawn broke 2 hours later. It was Professor McGonagall who found him. She was pale, her tartan robes torn, leading a group of aurors through the devastation. They found the bodies of the Death Eaters first, one wrapped in vines so tight they had to be cut free, one swallowed by the earth, one knocked unconscious by a falling branch, and the leader crushed and broken under a tree stump. They thought a squad of Aurors had been there, maybe a giant. When McGonagall saw Elias sitting dazed against a tree, covered in mud that looked like war paint, she stopped. She looked at the destruction around him. She looked at the wand in his hand, that ugly knotted thing she had once suggested he replace. "Mr. Thorn," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, Did you do all this?" Elias looked at his wand. It looked more like a piece of the forest than a tool of wizards. "The polished ones don't work in the mud, Professor," he croaked, his voice rough from smoke and screaming. "They slip." There was no ceremony. There was no house cup awarded that morning. The events were hushed up by the ministry to avoid panic. Elias Thorne went to the hospital wing, had his shoulder set, and slept for 20 hours. When he returned to classes a week later, the snickering had stopped. Not because everyone knew the details, most didn't, but there was a rumor, a quiet, terrifying rumor about what had happened in the woods. The Slytherins still looked at his wand, but they didn't call it Firewood anymore. They looked at the knots and the twisted bark, and they realized that firewood is what you use to burn things down. Elias never became a top duelist. He never learned to cast a perfect stunning spell, but he survived the war. And years later, it was said that when the Death Eaters attacked Hogwarts again, they avoided the forest, because they remembered the boy who wielded the earth itself. Sometimes the most dangerous magic isn't the one that sparkles in the classroom. It's the magic that knows how to get its hands dirty. If this forgotten legend of Hogwarts touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Elias Thorne's place? Like the video, share it with another Harry Potter fan, and subscribe to hear more hidden stories of courage, magic, and impossible odds. Sometimes the ugliest wand casts the strongest shadow.